Okay, we'll move on to Rich Uhrenholdt. Rich farms over by Elgin, Nebraska. He's got some of the not so good soils and some of the good soils over there, maybe in some places in his field. And Rich is also an entrepreneur, and let him talk about his situation.
Cool. Is this working? Yep. If you don't mind, I'm just going to kind of ramble around a little bit about my background. Truthfully, you look at the audience, I've probably been involved in this issue as long as anybody here. About 50 years ago, I worked for Prof. Olson and Bob Sorensen. I don't know if anybody know anything about them, but when I was I found out just a few years ago that one of the things that Bob was working on when I was there was the first nitrogen algorithm. And I was crunching numbers on this programmable calculator he's kind of proud of, and so maybe I was part of that. And Prof. Olson was probably one of the preeminent soil scientists of that era. I believe he and Don Sanders started looking at the effects of fertilizer on the environment in the 1950s, and that kind of permeated me because some of the philosophy that anybody that went through his classes at that time, that got permeated in your point of view. But in summer of '72, I was wandering around the state taking deep Vado samples west of O'Neill down in the Utica area, and spent my time taking those samples and then working in the lab. We were using the microcaldol to analyze those samples. But a couple of things that we're working on today, and I still do quite a bit of work with UNL, and we've got two projects we're working on. One is with Haishun Yang. We're working on irrigation management. Another with Jackson Stanzel and Joe Luck and Brian Krienke on nitrogen management. And what Steve mentioned before, talked about the improvements in farmers have had over the years. And I've seen that improvement. There's been a pretty dramatic improvement in management over the last 40 to 50 years. It's continual, it's gradual, but it's happening. But these new techniques, the ones we're working on with Jackson and Brian and Joe, we're using imagery to schedule that last 30 to 60 pounds of nitrogen. Nitrogen is, that whole nitrogen cycle is pretty complicated, and actually we're probably only dealing with 30 to 50% of the cycle. Most of the nitrogen that corn utilizes is probably natural, is coming from organic matter and other natural sources, and that's hard to predict. But we're trying to utilize, what they're doing is utilizing imagery to say, do we need to put on that last 30 to 60 pounds? And one of my thoughts there goes, I think it ties on to what Steve was talking about. It's a complicated management thing. And when the farmer, on that day, he's dealing with a lot of issues, and there are a lot of complicated issues. Like today he's thinking about, to get that harvest, the soybeans done before the weather that's coming in tomorrow. He's thinking about that crop report that's coming in tomorrow that might affect his income pretty dramatically. He's thinking about that broken down combine or broken down tractor in the summertime. Thinking about the kids' game tonight. The wife's got some stuff to do, or the husband's got some stuff to do. It just got all kinds of pressures out there. And in a lot of cases, you guys are working on, as a researcher, are working on single issues. And you focus your life on that one single issue, but the farmer he's dealing with an awful lot of things, and sometimes nitrogen management gets pushed down to the bottom of the pile. So as you do your work, Jackson and I were talking about this a little bit ago, you're going to have to make these solutions easy to implement and just kind of flow right into his workflow. I think for the most part, most farmers are trying to do their best, but it's a complicated world out there, and we have to deal with an awful lot of issues. Other one of my thoughts, the mayor was standing up here today talking about Norfolk and the settlement in Norfolk. and the Germans coming into this area. I mentioned this to Jackson a little bit ago, but it's a little over 100 years. A little over 100 years ago, Haber Bosch was developed. And a lot of the immigration from Europe was driven by hunger. The Poles and the Irish and the Germans and they were hungry, and that's one reason they came over here. And Haber Bosch, at the time Haber Bosch, there was like 1.5 billion people on Earth. Today there's 5 times that many. And Haber Bosch, artificial nitrogen, you take that away, and what could this Earth support for population? So we can't just eliminate nitrogen. We're going to have to learn to manage it. And those management techniques are complicated. They're hard to implement, and so that's part of the struggle. So if you don't mind, just a little bit of rambling. It's not some of the things we're trying to do, and some of my thoughts, experiences over the years. So thank you.